All right, welcome back to the Grand Solar Minimum channel. Today is Friday, November 8th, 2019. Tonight, we have a very special guest on our show tonight, Mr. Lee Wheelbarger. And before we get into tonight's broadcast, Lee, I'd like to start off by saying I want to apologize for the way things went down between us 2 years ago. I've gained a lot of patience, and I think over the time, some of the things that I've witnessed unraveling before my very eyes over the last 2 years has really opened my eyes. And I thought about some of the way the things were taken care of back then, and I just want to offer the apology first to you as well. Not expecting anything in return, but just to let you know, I never lost respect for your knowledge of GSM or anything like that. Everything that you've ever told me basically has happened almost exactly the way, and I hope you accept my apologies and we can move on because this is bigger than just us, right?
Right, and you know, like I said before, what happened, and that's the way it was, and you know, a lot of people had a lot of things to say about me back then because my predictions about what was going to happen in the future were much more dire than what other people were predicting.
Yeah.
And it's hard enough for people to believe that there's a GSM happening. And then you've got this guy that's saying, oh no, it's going to be worse than what everybody else is saying. And, you know, so I got called everything but a respectable human being by a lot of people during that period of time. But now here we are 3 years later, and basically almost everything that I predicted would happen has happened, with the exception of Orville Dam overflowing again. So that's the only prediction that haven't come true, but I wasn't aware that they had a couple of dams above Orville when I made that prediction that they were going to be able to stop all of that water from coming into Orville. So I can't complain that in 3 years I've had one prediction that hasn't come true.
Well, and that's just it. Like, you know, no matter what happened back then, as days went by, we've done our shows. I've always kind of followed you from afar afterwards, and of course, you know, we've talked off the side of the show, but things have really accelerated, and I kept thinking to myself, where have I heard that term before? And it had come from you, from when we first started talking back in 2016, early 2017, and I can only imagine, and there's been a couple times where I've caught myself thinking, I'm pretty sure Lee would say this is accelerating, but I can't believe the amount of accuracy. Heck, I even saw something that David Dubine had predicted back in 2017 as well, where he called for a late plant and long winter well into May of 2019, and sure enough, we just happened to stumble across the video, and he made that accurate prediction. So again, it's like you said, when you first talked about Grand Solar Minimum to me over 3 years ago, and some of my listeners and myself were not ready for that stone cold truth of how much impact that we're actually going to have during Grand Solar Minimum. So again, it's just, you know, there's a lot of things, a lot of time has passed, and I wanted to get your thoughts tonight mainly on a few things. One being the recent activity that we've seen on our star with a couple of solar cycle 25 sunspots showing up. And of course, there are people who are opposing this theory that are trying to latch on to the recent birth of the solar cycle 25. So I don't know, maybe you could share your insight on to what's happening, and is it a big deal, or is this just the very beginning?
Well, we're still going to have a solar cycle 25. It doesn't matter if you have a GSM or not. The issue is when are the two magnetic fields that Valentina Zarkova speaks of, when are they going to go out of phase enough so as that it weakens the magnetic field on the surface of the sun so much is that we can't produce more sunspots. We're still going to have little regions of magnetic instability, of which I was glad to see that NASA is using my term, as well as some other people are using my term. But we're going to continue to see these little regions of magnetic instability that look like sunspots, and we're probably still going to have some sunspots. But as we progress closer to the time frame of 2028 to 2032, the number of those sunspots are going to continue to fall off. So we're not going to see a sunspot cycle like we just had. It's going to be below that as far as the number of sunspots, the intensity of those sunspots. We knew we were going into this because we had 3 cycles of sunspots that the counts were decreased by about 30% on each one of those cycles. And then when we had during our last solar cycle, we had a double peak, and the second peak was higher than the first peak. And as soon as that happened, myself, John Casey, and others who had been following RC theory and how grand solar minimums begin, we all knew then that we were indeed going to go into a grand solar minimum. What we did not know is that it was going to progress towards a super grand solar minimum, because our data doesn't go back far enough for us to be able to see that. It took Valentina Zarkova and her group to be able to calculate all of that out using the information gleaned from the Wilcox Solar Observatory in California. So that's, we're going to have sunspots in 25. It won't be a case of no sunspots in 25. It will just be dramatically lower when we actually get into 25, because we're not really into it yet. We haven't had enough on the other side of the equatorial region to move technically into the next solar cycle.
And you bring up super grand solar minimum, as we are already in the second grand cycle. And what it said in Zarkova's paper was that 350 to 415 years was the grand cycles, and there's about 5 of those during the super grand solar minimum, which we entered in around the Maunder minimum period. So Valentina's work, let me tell you, it is very very criticized right now. I know there are many organizations that are trying to actually have nature.com take it down. They're trying to get it undone, basically, that it shouldn't be accepted. And there is a huge war going on right now. And I know Valentina and Mari have communicated often, but she is fighting a heck of a battle. And what's really sad is learning about what she does and how she does it. And all this hard work, and it's being treated as if, she's full of it, which we both know that's not true whatsoever. And, thanks to you, you basically introduced us to Zarkova's work back in the day. And, she told us back in 2017 that we were in a grand solar minimum. So, and now she confirms it with her recent paper. But I keep hearing this 2028 to 2032. And that's what concerns me the most as well, because I'm seeing more charts that reflect that kind of information, where we are really in for it when it comes to low solar activity. So I kind of get that these next couple of years are going to be kind of like the appetizer. We're going to get kind of a sort of a normal maximum, but not really. And then really start to see a huge plunge going into the 2030s. Is that correct on the timeline, would you say, or?
I don't think we're going to see a maximum.
Oh, wow.
Because as we start moving in, the 2 fields start going apart. So let's say that the 2 fields, and there's technically 4 fields in the sun. And one of the things, let me back up. When Zarkova announced her paper, when Piers Corbin and others were over there with her in England, and then after she had talked about her paper, and there were people who stood up and said, "Oh, well, we don't know that it's going to be that frequency when it gets to 2028, 2032. Those frequencies could change." Well, really, no, they can't. We have been monitoring those frequencies since 1953.
Wow.
And the sun is an extremely stable oscillator. Those frequencies haven't changed since 1953. They didn't change before that. We see the exact same frequencies now that we saw then. And what people have to realize is, to change a frequency, you have to change its size. So if you want a bell to be a lower pitched frequency, you have to make the bell bigger. If you want it to be a higher pitched frequency, you have to make the bell smaller. And if it gets to the point of where the sun changes its size enough to change its frequency, we've got bigger problems than a grand solar minimum. So, the people who tried to throw that at Zarkova and say that your frequency math isn't going to work because we haven't been looking at it long enough, those people don't know enough about the sun. They have not done the research themselves. They have not looked at the frequency stability from the Wilcox Solar Observatory, because had they done that, they would see, just like myself, Zarkova, and others, that the sun is an extremely stable oscillator. So you can pretty much count on it continuing those frequencies to resonate at the exact same frequency as they do now. So it's not going to change there. What we're running into, because you got to remember, the grand solar minimum technically doesn't start until next year.
Right.
That's when the fields start going out of phase with each other.
Okay.
And let's say that one field has an intensity of 5 and the other field has an intensity of 4. And so people go, oh, well, that means that we're going to have a field strength of 9. That's plenty. No, the problem is that the field that is 4 is a positive 4, and the field that is 5 is a negative 5. So the end result is going to be a -1, not a 9.
Okay.
And that's the issue. Because when you inject those two frequencies against each other 180 degrees out of phase, they cancel each other. And one is a negative, the other is a positive. And the problem is, when you look at that chart and you see them going apart from each other, it's the difference between those two fields is going to be the intensity, not the combination of them as a positive and a positive, because there's a negative involved. So it's the cycle was going to start out like a normal cycle, and it will start to ramp up. But the issue is, we're at, 2020 is when it's going to start. Okay. So the average cycle is about 11 years or so. Now we're in a minimum. So anytime you're in a minimum, that cycle is longer. So that cycle could be, say, 14 years, 13 right. years, if it's, a really long cycle. So we're going to start to see the maximum intensity of it in 2028 to 2032. So where it would be the end of it is when we're going to be at the maximum, which is really going to suck then. And then in the meantime, the two fields are going to start going out of phase with each other. So there's going to be kind of a ramp up in the beginning, but at the same time that we're starting to have the ramp up of the sunspots, we're also going to have the decrease of the magnetic field in the sun. So there's going to be a case of where they start to come up and then they start falling off again, and then they disappear to nothing.
This is crucial.
That's when it's going to be bad.
This is crucial information, and I really want to document this, what you're saying, because it makes sense, and this will really prove that the methods that we're using here to follow this are not just a bunch of smoke we're blowing up people's asses here. So interesting what dates you picked here and what's going to happen as far as that goes. Now, obviously, you're not surprised about the crop situation that we've had in 2000.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. This is exactly where I said we would be. And we've got 19 million acres that weren't planted this year.
That's a lot.
Oh, yeah. And it's going to be worse next year. And, anybody can go back and look at my videos from years and years ago. And I told people that we would start seeing it this year. And we have. If you're looking, you'll see it. The Army Corps of Engineers has already confirmed that we have had more rain in 2019 than at any time in the last 200 years. Gee, wonder why they chose 200 years.
Yeah, right.
Isn't RC theory 206 years?
Something like that. I mean, NASA raised that flag too when they predicted solar cycle 25 to be the weakest in the last 200 years or so. When you say things like that, you automatically correlate grand solar minimum. So I think this year I've noticed a little bit more disclosure, but you have to read between the lines. It's not so much out there, but how long? I mean, so we're already seeing the crop situation, and I think you probably agree, but next spring is going to be just as bad as this spring.
Worse.
You know, and a lot of the farmers I've talked to over the past several months, I think at first, yeah, we can handle a couple of these bad seasons, but then you ask them that question, what if we can't come out of this? What if we keep running into the same problem every year, every season? And then the answer becomes, well, we could plant shorter grow season grain, but that also cuts into your yield. So really, how many years can we stand this? And I haven't gotten to watch it yet, but I saw Ice Age Farmer put out a video today. I didn't get to listen to it or check it out. I don't know if you have, but it's talking about a food crisis, a food emergency happening sooner than we think. Almost as bad as urgent as some of these scientists who signed that document stating that we are in a climate emergency.
Oh, you mean Mickey Mouse and Goofy?
Yeah, and Dumbledore.
Yeah.
Of Hogwarts. So, USA.
Right. So, yeah, what I found interesting was I got an email this morning from a friend of mine who works for the World Bank, who's been a follower of this for years. And in the document that he sent me to a link from NASA that said that NASA had actually confirmed that global warming was not because of SUVs and CO2. So they've actually now came out and admitted that it is not CO2. CO2 does not drive our temperature. So the sun is the driver of our climate.
It's funny you mentioned that article because that article was shared in our group, and that was deemed by Facebook as a fake news story. And we actually got a violation for sharing that particular story about NASA saying that we are not warming. So, again, it has been very difficult. Things have changed a lot in the last 2 years as far as trying to get information out. And we've been buried, censored so bad ever since we broadcasted the interview with Zarkova on a recent paper. That's when things started getting really kind of heavy on us. But so you saying that right there tells me that if Mari and I are getting violations for fake news, that tells me that everything that we are getting violated for is true. In fact,
you're over the target. YouTube bans me every time I come on the air live, and they never provide a reason. This last time they sent me a couple of letters as far as like you were violated for ICUWY. Well, I don't know what ICWUY is. I've searched it. It doesn't show up on the internet. I've tried to, appeal it. They're going, oh, no, we're banned you for another 90 days. And so I came up. I covered the fires out west in California. And they said at 11 hours and 58 minutes into my broadcast, I violated this ICUWY or whatever it is. And the problem is the broadcast only lasted for 11 and a half hours. And the last time that they banned me from YouTube, they told me that I had a copyright violation of my own voice. So I was speaking just like I am right now. And a company in Italy swore up and down that they owned the rights to my voice. And so they gave me a copyright strike and banned me for 90 days. And then they did not allow me to broadcast again for almost 9 months as opposed to 90 days.
I'm telling you, Didn't Tony Heller got suspended on Twitter for a week?
Yes.
I mean, think about
I got
that. Like,
suspended permanently. I'm banned.
there you go. That's what I'm saying, Lee. Like, all these people that we follow and agree with, it's funny how you guys are being snuffed out. And we've, like I said, we've started to taste that a little bit too, where some of these articles that Mari has written or we cover, we get buried. We get violations for fake news. And it's like, we have the actual, we vetted it. We know the source. We know what's going on. But yet, still we get buried. And yeah, I was just going to mention your Twitter account. I mean, are you banned for life on that?
Yeah, for life. Banned for life.
Wow.
From Twitter. They don't want to hear what I got to say.
No.
And, you know, I had over 10,000 followers on my YouTube page. Now I'm down to only like 5,200. So, I mean, they take people off of my YouTube, you know, so they don't get the videos that I produce. They should show up in my feed for the videos that we do on Electric Blue and the other, you know, YouTube channels that we have. They don't show up. I can't see them at all. So I have to actually go search for them to find them because they're not in my subscription feed. And then I have a number of people that I followed that put out news and information and so on and so forth. Their channels are gone. I've lost 4 people that I normally follow just this week.
Jeez.
YouTube is like just tearing them down. And then, you know, we were earning some monies from broadcasting live. We had people putting money into Super Chat. We were set up with Amazon, all that stuff. It's gone. None of that ever came through. They held our money. They did all kinds of things to us to stop us from broadcasting on YouTube. So we're gonna come back again in another 60 days and start broadcasting again and see if they kick us off again.
It's amazing. We've had to change the way we do our broadcast in the evenings because we were being so basically I've changed the broadcast at night where I don't read any more political opinionated articles about climate change. I just stick with headline world weather events, crop loss, and, you know, maybe a little commentary on some weather and then do like an extended forecast. But before, when I would cover things on What's Up With That and Climate Depot, we were getting dinged a lot. That's when we seemed to have the most trouble, was whenever we started connecting the dots for people out there, like showing people that this political party or this politician was connected to this and that and that and this. And we really had a lot of trouble. So here recently, slowly but surely, things are coming back a little bit, but a lot of it's because YouTube and its algorithms have basically, it's like bumper bowling, okay? Like, we're throwing the ball down the bumper lanes now. We're trying to stay out of bounds. We don't want to be in the gutter because that's all bad. So now we gotta, you know, YouTube has like bullied us into this, okay, you're just gonna talk about weather and that's it. And maybe we'll let you talk about the crops. Every night after our broadcast in the evening, just like tonight's show, we will go and dispute as YouTube will flag us immediately for monetization. And then in 15 minutes later, it goes back to the green. Everything's okay. And this happens every evening show. And it tells me that there's someone out there who does a false flagging, or YouTube has a problem with its algorithms and they automatically flag things to begin with. I don't know. So anyway, who knows how the algorithms work? We've been doing some testing around where morning time, it seems like we're getting a little bit more views in the morning. Maybe that's because our folks in the UK are awake and moving around. Right now they're fast asleep. But boy, have I learned a lot about grand solar minimum just from experiencing it, watching it happen in front of my face, and of course covering the articles every day and watching the space weather. And this is funny. I always look at the same stuff that basically, these were the things that you kind of showed me in the very beginning, the solar wind speed, the density, the sunspot counts. So I've always kind of made sure I had a focus and an understanding. And I wanted to talk about some space weather that we had during 2 storms this year. And me and you were in constant contact during Dorian. And this, to me, was the first real proof that the sun has an impact on climate. And during Dorian, as Dorian strengthened into a super Cat 5, we should say, we were also experiencing high solar wind speeds, a G2 magnetic storm. And the other instance was Lorenzo, who developed out of nowhere in the eastern part of the Atlantic. And by the way, it was the strongest recorded hurricane in the eastern Atlantic. And that also happened. It strengthened right during a minor G1 geomagnetic storm. So how is it possible that two hurricanes that reach Cat 5 strength during a solar storm? How? I mean, to me, that's
well. If you watch my broadcast that I did at the time, because I was live on the air and I was getting ready to go off of the air, and we were watching Dorian, and we had satellite imagery. I was talking about it, where it was coming, and I had the weather radios running in the background. So I had my audio and NOAA and anything that I could get from any of the news channels at the time. And so just as I'm getting ready to go off the air, I had been on the air, I think like 3 hours, 4 hours, something like that. I got a warning from Space Weather Prediction that said that we are now being impacted by a coronal hole stream. And I said, we're not going off the air, folks. We're going to stay on the air, and we're going to watch this hurricane grow in intensity right before us. And everybody was predicting that it was going to get weaker because it had been churning there in the area. And when a hurricane churns in the same area, it tends to pull up cooler water, and that makes it so as that it doesn't grow in intensity, but it actually drops in intensity because it's not over warm water anymore. It's being shaded by the clouds, and it's being cooled by the rain, and it's churning up water under it. So I said, watch, folks, it's going to get bigger. It's going to get bigger. And before your very eyes, that's exactly what happened. Now, how does that happen? It's really simple. When a coronal hole stream comes in and impacts the planet, if it's on the daylight side of it, of course, at that time it was, those particles come in. It came in right over top of Dorian. And those highly charged particles come in, and they create a shower of particles that are between 50 and 100 nanometers in size. And those particles, as they come into the stratosphere and work their way down, they start to collect humidity. And when they start to collect that humidity onto them, it creates condensation on the particles, and ta-da, that turns into raindrops. So first it turns into a cloud, and then it turns into a raindrops. And so from the satellite imagery, both the visible and the radar, you can actually see the hurricanes growing in size as the coronal hole streams are impacting the tops of the hurricanes. The other time that this happened, that it was really, really dramatic, whereas it continued to grow, was when we had Hurricane Harvey. And that's one of the things that I predicted back in 2016, was not so much that we would have a lot more hurricanes and they would be these big ferocious things, but that they would grow in size and they would turn into these massive rain events and flood places. And that's exactly what Harvey did. Yeah. Harvey broke all records for the area that it covered and the amount of water that it put out. So, that's the type of thing that we're going to be able to continue to see as we continue to go into this, because weaker suns pour out more particles. They come spewing out through the coronal holes, which are massive now. Coronal holes used to be little small things. Now they're like slits that go half of the distance between the poles of the sun. They'll go all the way down across the equatorial region, almost from one pole to the other. So we get these massive streams of particles pouring out. They impact our planet because the sun is weaker. Our magnetosphere is weaker. Our magnetosphere doesn't capture those particles as well, and it doesn't pull them around to the polar regions, but instead it just pours right through along the equatorial towards the northern and southern poles. And the equatorial region starts seeing more rain. So you're going to continue to see that from through New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, the Ohio Valley, West Virginia, Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi, Oklahoma, and over towards the panhandle of Texas. So you're going to see this band, and there's a couple other states in there I missed as well, but pretty much between the Panhandle and upstate New York is where, and I'm talking about the Panhandle of Texas, is we're going to see this swath of more rain. And that's, what I started predicting back in 2016, and that's what we're seeing now. And it's going to just continue as we continue to move into this. Now, it'll drop off a little bit as we get a little bit more sun spot activity. Some of this will wane back, but when the two fields start going back out of phase, we'll start seeing a more weakening sun. So we're going to see a little bit of a how should we say, its last gasp before the two magnetic fields go in opposition to each other and cancel it out and make the sun really weak.
So you think in 2023 through 2026 then, not the maximum, but what you're saying, it's not going to be a maximum, but it's going to be just a little bit of a ramp up, and then that's when
going to fall off.
Going to fall off. Wow. So
yep. Be like cracking the throttle to take off, and you're finding out you're running out of gas. So it's going to be a wham. That's all you're going to get.
Lee, we got a question from the chat, and I don't know, maybe you could take a stab at this. I think you were one of the people that actually talked to me about health effects, but one listener wants to know, she doesn't understand the health effects when the KP is at 0.
There's a lot. It depends upon who you are, is how you're affected. We have people who have chest pains. We have other people who have palpitations of their heart, other people who have migraine headaches. So it depends upon how you are and where you are as to how it's going to affect you. And that's a broad area of study. So it all depends. When we first started researching this, there were minor things. Now they're saying there's mutations because more particles can come in. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that can change with that. So that's a whole night's program there.
Wow. Yeah, I noticed Mari was signaling, for her, it's going to be the migraines. For me, I get chest pains, and I notice too. So
I get the chest pains and the migraines, and my wife gets heart palpitations.
Jeez. So
I mean, I can check SPACEWEATHER pretty much anytime she's said she's got heart palpitations and the KP's low.
Same here.
We're down around 1 or so.
Same here with the chest pain. So that's definite. I can speak to that as well. But I know,
and what we have to understand is we're electronic. You're a human, but you run off of electricity. Okay, everything that you say, you hear, you taste, you smell, you feel, the pulsing of your heart, the reflex of touching, everything that goes on in your mind is minute electrical charges. We're talking less than 7 joules of electricity is all it takes to make your heart go thunk, 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 thunk. And so when you've got variances in KP and you've got increased particles, they can affect all kinds of things in your body. And we're all different. We're all human, right, but we're all different. And so some of us are more sensitive to some things than others. And that's, why it's such a wide range of effects that people feel. And it's like when you get up in a higher altitude, so like if you're in a jet airliner or you're in space and the particles are coming in, you'll actually see what looks like little fireworks going off in your eyes, because those are the particles coming through and hitting the nerves inside your eyes. And that's what you're getting, the little shower of sparks in your eyes. It's a little flicker here and there. And everybody in space anybody who has went in space, in orbit, has reported that. And I've actually seen it myself when trying to sleep on an airplane towards the poles. And that's why they give you health effects as far as if you're, if you're pregnant or other things.
Well, and I'm going to throw a little curveball at you, but it's kind of on topic as well. But, Mari has kind of shown me information about the Schumann resonance, and I didn't know what your thoughts were about. Well, and here's the thing. Lately, Maria's observed, it seems like a strong pulsation at the 17th hour here recently. Every 17th hour, she has noticed.
I think it's every 10 UTC.
Every 10 UTC. But the Schumann resonance has kind of been off the charts here lately, and I didn't know what you thought about that stuff.
The Schumann resonance is very important. And I've been preaching people that they need to watch the Schumann resonance. I'm still studying that to try to put the correlation together. It hasn't been a big priority here lately, but it used to be. And, we are seeing these anomalies. I think I called it out to you a few years ago when we had a big change in resonant frequency. We did that on a show years ago. And that's when it really started getting to me, the fact that the Schumann resonance was going that far out of kilter. And I think as we go farther into the super GSM, we're going to see more of these, how should we say, big swings in Schumann resonance frequency and intensity. I think there's a lot more to come with the change in the Schumann resonance.
Yeah, I'm not very well versed with everything about Schumann resonance, but it's the combination of KP being low. It's the combination of Schumann resonance, and again, like you said, this could be an entire show about human health and grand solar minimum. But this is just one aspect that I always keep in the back of my head when I think about anxiety or chest pains or just restlessness. I've caught myself maybe heading to bed at a decent hour and waking up in 3 hours feeling ready to go for the rest of the day, and it's only 11:30 in the evening. So
we have nights that we don't sleep at all. I mean, and the crazy part about it is I'll talk to people the following day and they're like, I didn't sleep last night at all, it was horrible. And I'm like, really? My wife and I didn't either. And
that's weird.
You talk to somebody else, it was really weird, I didn't sleep last night.
Yep, same thing happened in my work. It's funny you mentioned that, because I do. It's the topic of the morning. How you doing? Oh, I'm tired, I didn't get much sleep last night. That is a little weird. I'm just
right.
What's that?
And when you have the same people, I got about 5 of us together. On the nights that one of us doesn't sleep, the other 4 doesn't either. It's just that, and we're miles apart from each other. It's not like it's right down the road. Some of these people were 50 miles away, and some are 40 miles away, and 30 miles away, and then me and my wife. So it's strange how that affects over a region.
Yeah.
So, and it's only going to get worse. It's because things are changing, and they're not just changing on our planet. They're changing on every planet in the solar system. So, it's going to continue to progress towards the peak or minimum of the GSM as we move forward, and we're going to see some things like we've never seen before. And we're going to, there's a possibility that we may return to what the ancients saw, the ancient alien skies, talking about electric universe theory, right, and what Walt Thornhill talks about, and Dave, I cannot remember Dave's last name right now, but
LaPointe,
what those guys have seen.
Josh wants to know if you could speak on the extent of infrastructure failure that could take place during the grand solar minimum. Oh, God. And before you get into that, I can tell you just from 2017, or was it 18, where we had the ice jam floods, we had nonstop, let's just say water was now forming in the basement every time we got rain after that ice jam flood. So the infrastructure in Buffalo is super outdated. What's going to happen as we move forward for the rest of these bigger cities that have very old infrastructure? How long is it going to be before, it's totally crumbles?
We're already seeing it.
Yeah.
So so last winter, Omaha, Nebraska normally has 3 or 4 water main breaks in a winter. Last winter they had 17. The water mains froze under the ground. We're going to have bridges there's a bridge, I can't remember, it's I just looked at it the other day. I actually have a picture of it in my phone, where is that it's down south, water has gotten into the joints, it's now freezing more often, and part of the bridge has collapsed because the water got into it and froze and just broke out a section of the bridge. So now the bridge is closed. Because of the flooding, we just had a bridge north of Brunswick, Georgia, that was a CSX main line railroad bridge, that it flooded so much it washed down acres and acres of tree stumps and trees, and they pushed up against the railroad trestle and ripped out the entire railroad trestle. We're going to see water treatment facilities that make fresh water. They're going to freeze and won't be able to produce the fresh water. We're going to see wastewater treatment facilities that are going to freeze. They won't be able to treat the wastewater. We already saw that. We saw that not last winter, or it was last winter we went to Texas, right? And we saw, last winter, traveling over to Texas right prior to Harvey, we actually saw 7 different facilities that had frozen solid, and their wastewater, and I'm talking about sewage treatment plants, their wastewater was going out and filling fields full of sewage and freezing solid out in the fields. There were facilities at truck stops that their lines had ruptured and were going out and filling up fields. There were all kinds of homes, because the homes that are to the south don't have the same R rating of insulation as homes to the north. So as the magnetosphere gets weaker and the cold air, which they used to call Alberta clippers when they used to cut just across the upper part of the northern part of the United States. Now we have these unbelievable lows, and they can also come further down, so we call them bombogenesis. And we're also seeing, I think I called you the other day and told you where we had a super low pressure area that was considered a hurricane, but there was no rain involved.
Yeah,
which is kind of odd.
Yeah, where the center was like off to the east. I remember that.
Right. There's no rain in it at all. No. I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on here? I've been following these things for 45 years. I've never seen one that did that. So, there's lots of things that are going to fail. So we're going to have, and it's going to be a cascading failure. Last year we had the Hudson River froze, and what they use for an icebreaker to go up and down through the river is a tugboat with bubblers. But they were within inches of getting into ice too thick for that tugboat or buoy tender to break the ice. And I got to do a debate with a guy. He goes, that's not an icebreaker. And I'm like, dude, they're breaking ice with it every day.
Yeah.
Okay. You can't take the Coast Guard icebreakers that we have and break ice with them in that area. Okay. They won't go there. But the Army Corps of Engineers has these small tugboats with bubblers that are designed to go and break ice up and down the Hudson. What happens when it gets so thick that tugboat can't break that ice? You're not going to have any more fuel oil going up the Hudson River to deliver fuel oil to the northeastern part of the United States. And the vast majority of the fuel oil that heats the northeastern part of the United States goes up the Hudson River. So it's going to kind of like cascade an avalanche when all of these infrastructures start to collapse. And we'll start seeing some of that this winter. There will be, more and more things. Last year, they lost $10 million worth of onions when a warehouse in Idaho's roof collapsed, and took out the entire inventory that they had inside that giant warehouse. Talking about the crops not coming around this year. And people talk about, well, what we're going to grow next year. Well, not only did the farmers not get their crop out of the field, the companies that make the seed corn Northrop King, Pioneer, DeKalb, all of these other seed producers, they had a extremely decreased yield as well. So we don't have the seed supply for next year like we thought we were going to have. So this coming spring, there's going to be issues with people actually getting the seed corn and the seeds to put into the ground because there was such a dramatic decrease in the amount of yield. And so we'll start to see the decrease of that seed corn being available in all varieties, not just seed corn. But we're going to see a shortage of that, as well as we're going to see a shortage of the products themselves, because yes, we've had our harvest this year. Yes, we've got inventory in stock now, but we're going to be shy before we get to August, September next year.
Well, we're not done yet.
So you can expect to see food prices going up.
I know we got farmers still working in the fields, still getting their crop out. And speaking to a guy who's from Wisconsin, talking about that there's times where farmers don't get their crop out of the field till almost springtime, right before they start planting again. And of course, you're talking about less yield, less money for it. So, but to me, with the crop seasons getting shorter, like you said, back in 2016 when we first started talking, that's one of the first things you told me, is that winters will get longer and growth seasons will shrink. And 2018, they were starting to get smaller. And boy, it got really small this year in 2019, especially witnessing freezing temperatures almost through May in some parts of the United States. And then, of course, that monster snow that we got on September 29th, 52 inches in northern Montana. I get it, it's Montana, and I expect cooler weather up there at the border, but I don't expect 52 inches of snow on September 29th by any means.
We're 2 weeks ahead of schedule on snowfall in the northern part of the United States right now. So the amount of snow that we've already had fall this year is 2 weeks ahead of schedule. If you add up the date to get to this total, we're 2 weeks ahead of that schedule. And we're going to see that each year. The winter is going to start about a week or so earlier, and the spring is going to be about a week or so later. It can go a little bit more as we get towards 2028. But right now, we're going to see a week or two each year that we're going to lose for our growing season on the beginning and on the end. So it'll be delayed getting it in the ground, and it'll have to come out earlier because the frost will come earlier. And we've lost a lot of crop, and the Department of Agriculture is not covering it as they should. But all the farmers know. And I have farmers that are calling me going, hey, what do you do? I'm like, shorter season crops and plant more fields.
Right. And that's what our friend Matt also was talking about as far as that as well. But I guess my other question I really wanted to ask you was, so me being really new to the topic, only 3.5 years into it, and I've really paid attention 2017, 2018, and then this year coming up. Now, I remember 2017 having some really cold, so I thought, okay, so we're going to see the cold earlier in November and snow, and then we had this sudden stratospheric warming event that happened in the North Arctic last year, and then this year we get it in the southern hemisphere. So I guess my question to you is, when we get these sudden stratospheric warming events, are these to be grouped in with grand solar minimums, or are these just phenomena that just happen to be taking place during a grand solar minimum?
I think it's a phenomenon that takes place during a grand solar minimum. I think we're going to see a lot of things that we've never seen before. It's not just going to be that. At the same time, we're also going to have events where particles are coming in, they're mixing with gases in the atmosphere and or interacting with gases in the atmosphere, and their byproduct of that is massive amounts of nitric oxide gas. And that gas will create a large cooling area, and that cool air, nitric oxide gas, will descend down towards the surface. And so you'll be outside on a warm day but all of a sudden you'll feel a little breeze blowing across you that feels like somebody's blowing an air conditioner on you. And you're like, whoa, that's way out of place.
Right.
That's a lot cooler than I expected that breeze to feel. That's the same thing as the stratospheric warming, but that's the opposite side of it with the stratospheric cooling from nitric oxide gas.
Yeah, Mario was saying we get that now, and I remember talking about it too when we lived in Buffalo, but you're right. I've noticed it more this year. In fact...
Not even, it was last year and the year, I think last year's when I really noticed it, and it's like it didn't feel like we got a summer ever. Like, there was probably, our summers, I remember here in New York, being a native my whole life in New York, pretty much, minus 3 years. The summers, we have 4 distinct seasons in New York, very distinct. And it's a beautiful thing I've always appreciated, especially after spending time in Florida and spending time in California. The 4 seasons is a special feature of New York. And the past few summers, the summers are not defined. It's crazy. There is that Arctic, it feels like an AC is cooling when the wind blows. It's too cold near anywhere outside. A lot of times I remember sitting outside on my telescope with shorts and a tank top in the summertime. You cannot do that in New York during the summertime anymore. You'll freeze. It's cold.
Like, it's chilly.
It's like hoodie weather.
Pretty much.
In the summertime now. A lot of times, minus like the odd, week or two.
Well, and we live closer to the East Coast now than we did when we lived in Buffalo. So we still got a lot of cooler weather in the summer months, but the heat is closer to the East Coast when it ridges and the jet stream dips down, and we always seem to get that extended warming while the rest of the country is cooling way down. But you're right. This summer, especially when we lived in Buffalo, I had noticed it as well. But being up here, we definitely went from winter to like maybe a couple of weeks of spring to summer, and then we went to summer and a very brief autumn period to now. Tonight I walked outside with shorts and no shoes on to grab something out of the car, and it's cold, like super. I know I'm not wearing any shoes, but I mean I wasn't ready for the cold. I mean it's November 8th.
24 degrees at 8:30
Good
this
grief.
morning. I think it was 24 degrees, and I think the high was 34.
So I guess my point, Lee, was that we can expect colder temperatures, but we can't expect the seasons to act in a certain pattern. The GSM, we have a lot of unknowns. We just know that we're going to have some challenging, much colder weather, a lot wetter conditions, a lot shorter crop seasons, a lot less yield. Unless farmers all over the country take your advice as well and plant more fields and short-term crops. So, but that's my biggest fear moving forward is I think we can get past some of the challenges of the weather that throws our way as long as we're prepared. But really, when you see some of the stuff that Ice Age Farmer puts out, and you see it yourself, you have farmer friends like I do as well. And I'm learning a lot about agriculture and that I didn't know. And you kind of hear in some people's voices where they're comfortable talking about this, and some of them are kind of a little worried because they've never seen things like this, and they've got family members that's been farming since the 30s telling them the same. I've never seen anything like this before, and nobody has. Not for the last 206 years, right?
Right. Nobody has. And remember I used to tell you about that we would see temperatures swing 60 degrees and 70 degrees in a single day.
Denver stuck out. When that happened, I thought of you that day.
Yeah, because it's happening. And the issue is we're going to have times like that, but it's going to be in the middle of the growth season.
Jeez.
And so now where your crops are in the field, but that night you're going to have a dramatic temperature and drop, and it's going to come through and frost and kill off your crop before it's matured. So it's one thing if you have a crop that doesn't mind, being frozen later on, like for example, when you're trying to get whole corn, you want that to die and dry in the field.
Right.
And then you'll come through and you'll pick it and haul it and and take it out with your combine. That's okay, but you can't do that to strawberries.
No.
You can't do that to the other
Grapes.
fruits and vegetables.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way. They don't, and even corn. If it's not matured, then it's not gonna you're not gonna be able to use that for whole corn. You're gonna have to, and that was the thing they were talking about. Oh well, yeah, we're gonna get the crop out of the field this year. Well, yeah, but a lot of those farmers that were gonna use that for whole corn, they're not gonna do that now. A lot of the farmers had to use it for silage because their fields got killed off by frost and flooding and so on and so forth. So there's a whole lot more silage being cut this year, where they chop up the corn stalks and the corn cobs and so on and so forth, and they just feed it and put it in either a silo or some type of a bunk or something to store it. So there's massive amounts of silage this year from corn that didn't mature or was killed.
Yeah, that's what Matt was
Same
telling
thing
us,
with
too.
other crops as well.
It's soybeans. The harvesting on that is getting a little bit better. But, Mari and I were having dinner and just looking at the ingredients on all of the foods that you eat. There is some sort of soybean product involved with the foods that we eat. So this is important that we do pay attention to, and that's why we've tried to add that third element. That we talk about space weather, we talk about climate, and we try to keep a close eye on the crop situation as well, because our food security is really just another bad season away from being in some serious trouble. I mean, I still think we're going to see food price rises here this fall, late this fall, and early next winter, when we start getting in the final numbers in January on these harvests and how bad or good some of these might have come in. I know Tennessee and Texas, states like that, they're in pretty good shape. But, how's it going to end for Illinois and Indiana and places like South Dakota and Minnesota? There's a guy that I've followed recently. He's a little bit different from the norm. He is just a 100% farmer. His channel is called Millennial Farmer. And I don't think he really pays attention to the climate and all that kind of stuff there, but you catch him in his videos and he keeps repeating himself. I've never seen mud out here. I've never seen running water out in this part of the field. It's so muddy out here. I've never seen it this muddy out here. And farmers, I've always said this, when you want the truth about the climate, just talk to a farmer, because they know the weather is almost like one with the farmer. They have to be able to breathe in and know that rain is on the way. They know this stuff. So to me, the biggest red flags when it comes to climate talk are the farmers, when they start talking about things they've never seen or they haven't encountered before.
Well, the thing that I always thought was funny that's going on now is we've got this trade war with China, but yet they're still buying soybeans.
Yeah.
So, we're at war, but we want your soybeans. So, so you've got that. And then as the sun gets weaker and we get more particles coming into the atmosphere, we get more stratospheric clouds because of those particles coming down and getting condensation on them. So it's making our skies a lighter colored blue. We've always now got, it's very, very rare that you have no clouds in the sky at all. Or even if you do have no clouds in the sky, if you look out over the horizon, you'll always see kind of a haze.
Yep.
And I encourage people to go back, and I'm talking people that are more than 35 years old, okay? And people that have 35 millimeter cameras or regular cameras that you printed the photographs on. Go back and look at your photographs of the summertime and look at what the solar cycle was doing. And you'll notice that when we had high solar activity in the 70s and the 80s and so on and so forth, when we had high solar activity, high sunspot counts, if you go and you look at the photographs you have back then and you see the sky, you'll see in the summertime that the sky was a nice, deep, dark, pretty blue. It's not anymore. It's a lighter blue. It's more of a powder blue. It's, it's a really, really light blue. And that's because of that increased nucleation that is taking place in our stratosphere and atmosphere. And so we're going to continue to see that. And that is actually refracting some light. In fact, there's people who have taken pictures from that are visible satellite imagery of the Earth over the last 10, 15 years. And we're starting to see more clouds being formed. We're seeing more ship tracks from the number 2 bunker that the ships are using. The contrails from planes are getting bigger. So It looks like all the planes now are doing chemtrails, not just a few. So all of these things are having an effect on our weather, on our growing periods, on the amount of energy that's hitting the ground to allow the plants to grow. So what if we do have a regular season that's the same period of time as it should? The amount of energy that's hitting that plant because of the refraction from in the atmosphere, the amount of energy hitting the plant is less. So we get less yield from that plant because it's not getting the same amount of energy that it did back in the 70s and the 80s. So all of these things are going to come together and just start. Each one of them is just one more piece of the puzzle that's going to fall out on us when this whole thing collapses.
You know, you're talking about the maximum cycles in the 70s and 80s and the sky, how the color has changed. It used to be a deeper blue. It kind of just made me think about this, and Mari and I were just talking about this. In fact, sometimes I feel like I'm on the Truman Show. But in the 80s, I remember...
This is the Grand Solar Minimum Show. But, that's okay.
But in the 80s, I remember being very dark complected, very suntan. As the 90s, I was not as dark as I was as a younger boy. And then noticing the last couple of decades, especially here recently, since 2016, I could be outside and not tan the way I used to. And we were looking at school pictures of our kids from this year. Now, mind you, my son plays football and baseball. He was outside all summer long, as well as for football season. Pictures were taken about 3 weeks into school, so kids are still outside playing. And we're looking at these pictures, and my goodness, I mean, you would think that our children don't see the light of day. So I guess this is going to wrap into my next question as well, but I've noticed, on top of the fact that maybe I'm not getting the tan that I used to, but not only that, here lately, it just feels like when you're out driving around at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it feels like it's 5 o'clock. As if it's not just the sun that's doing it, it's the thick cloud coverage. I've never seen cloud coverage like we've had here this year. We'll go several days in a row with just cloudy weather, and it feels darker. Automatic headlights are popping on in the middle of the day. That has something to do with cloud nucleation, am I right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
we're not getting as much energy here to absorb. So you're not going to get the tan. You're not going to get the yield. You're not going to get the warmth. And we're now seeing the ocean getting cooler. And I said this years ago that it was going to start getting cooler because the energy that's hitting the ocean isn't hitting it so much anymore. It's part of that is being refracted. Yep. And what people don't realize is that clouds block about 30 watts of the TSI that we get on the planet. So we would, if we didn't have clouds, we would have 1,390 watts per square meter, as opposed to 1,360 watts per square meter. Okay, so you're like, wow, that's a substantial difference. Well, what happens if you only increase the cloud cover by 10%? That's 3 watts.
Well,
guess what? It only takes 1 to go into a little ice age.
I think last I checked, we were talking about 80% cloud coverage. So 10% wouldn't be that much more. And it's very possible, with as weak as the magnetosphere is and all the cosmic rays that we're getting, that's going to continue to bombard our atmosphere. TCI is near record cold as well. I think right now we're sitting at 3.96. The record is 2.05 set in the last minimum. So tonight this was just kind of an icebreaker. Maybe we should pick a night where we could like pick a topic, and I'm just kind of all over the place. I've had so many questions, and I thought, well, I'll ask them tonight. But is there anything that you would like to kind of conclude with tonight as far as grand solar minimum? And again, we could always pick a future date and talk about prep and survival and stuff like that. But what is your general message to everyone who is learning about grand solar minimum and how to prepare themselves and their family? I know there's no real short answer, so I'll give you as much time as you need here.
Well, first off, everybody needs to buy John Casey's book, Upheaval. If you haven't read it, go get it. That is the best of all the books that I've read, all the research. The 3 books that John Casey has Cold Sun, Dark Winter, and Upheaval. Everyone should know those 3 books, chapter and verse, because that breaks it all down so you can understand it. Then everybody should study Valentina Zarkova's work. Look at what the Russians are doing for preparation. Then everyone should start to prepare. And if you can't go south, dig a hole. You will be much more likely to survive an event like this underground than you will above ground. So get yourself a storm shelter, or have insulate your basement, or dig a basement. Get a piece of galvanized pipe and a backhoe and dig it down in the ground, and then store things like canned goods, water purification. Get yourself a backup energy supply. Start to prepare, because you're not going to be able to in a few years. You have to prepare now, because when everybody catches on to what's going on, the shelves are going to be empty, just like before a hurricane, but it's going to be that way globally. So the supplies that you can buy now are going to be 4, 8, 10, 100 times more expensive then. And then it'll come to the point of where they won't be available at all. And so, dig a hole and be prepared to put you and your family, have a large water supply, get yourself a cistern, get yourself a filtration capability to filter out that water. Get yourself a way that you can circulate air from the outside to the inside with a filter. Just prepare, because between 2028 and 2032, most people won't survive if they're not underground in the extreme northern and southern hemispheres. The temperatures during the deep winter are, talking December, January, February. The temperatures during that time of the year are going to be about like they are on the North Pole and the South Pole. The grid's not going to support that. Your home's heater, heat pump, whatever, is not going to be able to heat that. The loss through the windows and the doors and the walls is going to be beyond what your heating system is going to be able to keep up with. So you're going to have to go underground. You're going to have to hibernate just like bears do in the wintertime. You're not going to have a choice. This is going to be beyond anything that anyone has experienced in modern day, in the last 200 years. What we had during the Little Ice Age was nothing compared to what we're about to experience. And so I just highly, highly encourage everyone to get a house with a basement or dig a hole in the ground and stock up as much canned goods as you can, and make sure you got some fruits and vegetables in there so you don't have scurvy. And then get seeds, and learn how to grow a garden. Practice now, because when there is no more infrastructure, there is no more grocery store, there is no more electricity, you're not going to be able to go to the grocery store or Walmart or, Food Lion or Kroger or whatever it is and pick up the groceries. You're going to be dependent upon yourself. So, get meals ready to eat, MREs from the Army, or get them from a package company that already does the survival foods. Can your own, which is what I recommend, so people learn how to do canning, and stock up on canned goods. And like I said, water, because you can go 3 minutes without air and only 3 days, or excuse me, 3 minutes without air, 3 hours without shelter in extreme environments, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food. And so, those are the rules of 3, and you need to be prepared. So is that you're not without the water, or without the food, or without the shelter. And lightning is going to get much worse as well. That's already happening.
Yeah, we've seen that. People just
that's about all I got.
People getting struck on golf courses, people getting struck while riding their motorcycles. And as you were talking about what's going on, what's happening, what to do to prep, the number one question for those out there who just simply don't have the means to move south, a lot of folks are kind of concerned, especially some of our friends in Maine, what they're going to do and how they're going to get through this challenging time of climate. And I know one thing, the unfortunate part this year, and we're going to try a couple things differently this year when we try to start some seeds, but we're concerned as well. We know we have to put a plan together, and I think the ultimate idea is probably, the more we see this, the more convincing I am of how bad things are getting as far as where things are going to grow. And we started seeds this year, nothing happened. Not one thing. And Mari started these seeds in favorable areas. I think the temperature of the soil was an issue. The amount of sunlight was an issue. The amount of cloud coverage obviously is increased. And of course, moisture was definitely in abundance. And you talked about it earlier, how this has been one of the wettest years. I remember since, I think, March or April, you started seeing these records being broke for 12 months. From this 12-month period to this 12-month period, we just broke a record. And then the next month, we just broke another 12-month record to 12-month record. So it seemed like there for a while, from March, April, May, and June, we kept breaking these 12-month records of precipitation. So as this continues, and I think it's safe to say we've got at least another year and a half of deep minimum conditions before we start to see that minor ramp up. Time will tell, but I'll say this, Lee. Over time, I have also, your voice is rung out in my head when I see certain events happening. And at first, there were things that I couldn't handle maybe and didn't want to accept. And that's unfortunate, because when it starts happening right in front of your face, I'm one of those people that learns the hard way. And I'm just glad that I'm able to talk about this. I think this channel is going to get more in depth on prepping and growing as the coming weeks go along here, as we get ready, hopefully, for spring in some areas. I know that seems far away, but we want to start prep talking that stuff now. That way we're kind of ready for it when it's time to get out there and start planting again. We got to try new things. I know a lot of folks talking about beds, raised beds that you can actually move indoors if the weather gets too inclement. So there's just all kinds of things. Actually, I think Henrik might have some kind of setup like that in Denmark. So, but anyway, Lee, I hope that we could get together in the future and maybe we can pick a more organized topic. Like I said, tonight I just wanted to pick your brain a little bit. It's been a while since we spoke. And if you had the time, maybe we could do another show where we can just kind of pick maybe a prepping survival type talk show and just kind of take questions and stuff like that. That's up to you, though. So we'll see how that works out.
Sure, we can do that. And
awesome.
We also need to be aware of, as our sun gets weaker and we start moving in towards the deepest part of the super grand solar minimum, with those regions of magnetic instability, we also have the threats of massive CMEs, some of which we've already seen. So when people go into their preparations, they need to have a pioneering attitude as far as the equipment that they choose and the tools that they have and so on and so forth, because we have a risk of Carrington events. And the worst part about it is, if we have another event, we've already had one that made a Carrington event look like a firecracker compared to a stick of dynamite. We have the potential to also be hit by a Carrington type event that'll make the Carrington event look like a firecracker compared to a nuclear warhead. So there are real risks with what we're going into. So we need to prepare for the possibility of losing electricity, losing modern communication systems, and those grids and electrical systems and communication systems not coming back online in our lifetime. So that is another real risk, and everyone needs to be aware of that and prepared for that. And there is a good likelihood for that, especially with what we're getting ready to go into. So that would be another, and the government is now aware of that and is taking action to prepare for that. So we're not the only ones that are aware of that.
Well, and with that being said too, the one thing that really put in perspective for me, now I understand why they're protecting the lie so much. I saw a presentation about how Donald Trump did the right thing by pulling us out of the Paris Treaty Accord. What it comes down to, it's not even about climate change. It's not even about changing the climate. It is a money-making scheme for the IPCC that the United States of America was going to front this $100 billion slush fund for these countries to sign up on this fake Paris Treaty Agreement to change the climate, to keep us from going over the limit. And in fact, learning that this is all about money. This is all about selling carbon credits to countries that will continue to pollute, and those so-called countries that are producing CO2 emissions that are higher than other countries, those are the ones that are going to continue to contribute to that, as long as they're paying what we call here the troll toll, basically. The IPCC has a troll toll. As long as you're willing to pay that, you can go ahead and continue to produce CO2 at maximum levels. And that's another reason why now I believe in that CO2, the whole man-made thing, is a giant scam. It's a hoax. You can, in my book, we can almost close the book on this. I mean, when you watch this video, this presentation, it all just brings you to that aha moment, and it makes sense on why mainstream and everyone involved is trying to protect this lie, because there's trillions of dollars on the line. But that's a whole nother show as well.
Well, all global warming is man-made. It's made by Dr. Man, M-A-N-N.
There we go.
It's not made by common man.
I tell you, folks, not only is he an encyclopedia of knowledge, but he is a comedian part-time on the side. All right.
Commodian.
Well, Lee, I really appreciate you taking some time and spending with us tonight. We are going to do this really soon, hopefully next weekend. Maybe by Friday we can kind of talk about prepping and survival stuff. There was a lot of questions in the chat, and I kind of feel like maybe next week we'll promote the show and say, hey, if you got some questions for Lee, let's see him in the comments section, and we can kind of talk prep and survival, because I think really we need to start shifting gears. The daily shows I do are headlines and weather, but it would be nice to have a weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly show where we can talk about prepping and what we're going to need to start learning how to do here moving forward in the Grand Solar Minimum. So once again, Lee, thank you very much for joining us, guys. Mari, would you like to say goodbye to everybody?
Well, yeah, I just wanted to explain my lack of activity in the chat. Mainly, we're running this live show off a 6-year-old laptop.
Yeah, Mari didn't want to break
Wi-Fi,
anything.
And I just don't want to use the chat I just don't want to touch it. I've been monitoring it very closely. We have an issue with our main machine again, and I had some issues, so I do apologize for lack of fancy graphics, intros, outros, screen captures, all
But it was
that.
fitting. This is this was like retro with Lee Wheelbarger.
I have really missed Lee on this channel.
Me too.
Because the conversation is always intriguing, and it's like everyone has something to bounce off one another, and you got the interaction with the chat.
And Lee, you were received very well by a lot of our longtime supporters too.
Enjoyed having you back, Lee. So,
well, thank you very much. I greatly appreciate that.
Very
Likewise.
happy you took this time to spend on this lovely Friday night with us.
All right, so we're going to wrap it up, but we'll have Lee on again very soon, probably next Friday, as long as his schedule is available. He's a very busy man. So with that being said, we appreciate everybody who tuned into the Grand Solar Minimum channel on Friday night here on the YouTube channel. The call-in show, I'm going to go ahead and say this. As long as we can get our main computer back up, is still on for Saturday, 9 p.m. for the Patreon members. If something should change, we will notify that earlier in the day, but right now, we are going to hope and pray that we can get the main system running for us so we could do the call-in show.
If I can't get my main computer working by tomorrow, I'll move the call-in show for Monday.
Okay.
Just so people can
we could do that
in advance.
We could actually move it Monday to 6 p.m. or actually a little bit later than that because you won't be home yet, so we'll wait. Okay, we'll figure it out, folks. But again, thanks again to Lee Wheelbarger for tuning in. We hope everyone has an awesome weekend. Until next time, folks, we will talk soon. Take care, guys.